The U.S. announces sanctions against 6 more officials of central and SAR governments. Beijing and Hong Kong condemned the move. The top court restores former lawmaker Lam Chung-ting's conviction over his naming of an individual in an ICAC probe. And the death toll from last week's earthquake in Myanmar exceeds 2,700. Hello and welcome to TVB News. I'm Melissa Hekalea. The U.S. State Department has announced sanctions against 6 mainland and Hong Kong officials in Washington's latest move targeting the city's national security-related officials. They include Secretary for Justice Paul Lam and outgoing Commissioner of Police Raymond Siu. Both the central and Hong Kong SAR governments have condemned the U.S. sanctions as unreasonable. Jackie Lin reports.
6 sanctioned officials from Beijing and Hong Kong named by the U.S. State Department include Director of the Office for Safeguarding National Security in Hong Kong, Dong Jinwei, Secretary for Justice Paul Lam, Commissioner of Police Raymond Siu, and Secretary General of the Committee for Safeguarding National Security of Hong Kong, Sonny Au. Also on the list are Assistant Commissioners of Police in charge of national security, Dick Wong and Margaret Chu. A spokesperson for the Office of the Commissioner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Hong Kong condemned the U.S. sanctions for denigrating Hong Kong's rule of law, smearing the one country, two systems principle, and interfering in China's internal affairs. In Beijing, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs warned of strong countermeasures. It added the imposition of unilateral sanctions exposed Washington's goal to undermine Hong Kong and contain China's development. The Hong Kong SAR government, meanwhile, condemned the American move as a vain attempt to intimidate national security officials, which reviewed the barbaric acts of bullying from the U.S. It said the SAR government is committed to protecting the rights and interests of all officers. The statement also noted the wanted absconders mentioned by Washington face warrants issued by the court, and that's not about exercising their freedom of expression. The administration said the issue is instead related to them hiding overseas while engaging in acts endangering national security. The SAR government added all its measures imposed on the absconders are in line with human rights principles. Secretary for Justice Paul Lam said U.S. sanctions have no impact on his work and life. He said the best way to deal with them is to remain calm and collected, as well as working harder to safeguard national security and promote Hong Kong's stability and prosperity. The U.S. State Department said on Monday officials from the Chinese central government and Hong Kong used the national security law to intimidate, harass, and silence 19 pro-democracy activists who were forced to flee overseas. The Trump administration decided to sanction 6 officials, alleging that their actions and policies have undermined Hong Kong's autonomy and involved transnational acts of oppression. Their assets in the U.S. or held by American institutions will be frozen, and they will be prohibited from transacting with Americans or within U.S. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
The Court of Final Appeal restored former lawmaker Lam Chung-ting's conviction over his disclosure of the identity of an individual who is being investigated by the Independent Commission Against Corruption. He was initially sentenced to 4 months in prison. The case involved Lam disclosing the identity of Police Superintendent Yao Nai-kung at 3 press conferences between 2019 and 2020. Who was under investigation by the ICAC over his involvement in the Yuen Long mob attack. Lam was previously charged with 3 counts of disclosing the identity of a probed individual before the conviction was overturned after an appeal. This as the Department of Justice filed an appeal with the top court reversing the earlier ruling by a 3-2 decision. Former Minister Wang Yi held talks with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Moscow, Russia. Wang said it is necessary to implement the consensus reached by the 2 heads of state, and China is willing to work with Russia to promote a multipolar world. Jackie Lin reports.
Foreign Minister Wang Yi embarking on a 3-day visit to Moscow for strategic cooperation talks with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. In his speech, Lavrov said the main purpose of Wang Yi's official visit is to prepare for the Russian-Chinese summit to be held in Moscow in May. Lavrov said this year Russia, China and the world will celebrate the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, and there's a mission for them to prevent the rise of fascism, Nazism and militarism. Wang cited how the Chinese and Russian peoples secured world peace by defeating Japanese militarism and German fascism in the war. Wang said China is ready to work with Russia to shoulder the responsibilities as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, foster a multipolar world, and make new contributions to the cause of peace and development of mankind. Wang Yi added their diplomatic efforts should also focus on implementing the consensus reached by the heads of state of China and Russia. Wang noted since the beginning of this year, President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin have held 2 strategic talks and set out directions for deepening all-round strategic cooperation between the two countries. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Despite ongoing sanctions from the 3-year Russia-Ukraine war, the Russian economy has shown surprising resilience, recording growth last year. Scholars suggest that the recent visit from Foreign Minister Wang Yi will prioritize strengthening bilateral trade. Sakura Ip has more from Moscow.
In a supermarket in central Moscow, a small box of raw beef now costs roughly 100 Hong Kong dollars. That is about 20% higher than a year ago. Another favorite cheese has seen prices doubled for both local and imported varieties. Russia's February inflation rate climbed to 9.8%, marking the 4th consecutive increase, and many residents are feeling the impact.
The wages haven't gone up. Maybe like 10-15% just to keep up moderately with the inflation, but it's still not enough to like keep the comfortable lifestyle that we used to have before the war.
Under sanctions, many Russians are turning to domestic products.
Normally people like the farmers' products and the local food. Yes, it's fine. So we don't suffer a lot from the situation. I mean, because our internal food industry is developing a lot.
Despite the ongoing war, Russia's GDP recorded a growth of 4.1% last year. Exports to China, particularly in energy and food, have been a key driver. Last year, trade volume between China and Russia reached a historic high of $244 billion, a 1.9% year-on-year increase. Looking ahead, an academic believes Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit to Russia is a preparation for a future meeting between the two countries' leaders, while the focus will be on enhancing economic and trade cooperation. Zachary, TVB News, Moscow.
The death toll from last week's massive earthquake in Myanmar has passed 2,700 as accounts of some people's final moments have emerged. 200 Buddhist monks crushed by a collapsing monastery, 50 children killed when a preschool classroom crumbled, and 700 Muslims struck during Friday prayers in the holy month of Ramadan. This, as aid groups that have arrived in the worst-hit areas said there is an urgent need for shelter, food, and water. Tracy Furness has more.
In the hard-hit city of Mandalay, Chinese rescuers work alongside local responders searching around the clock for survivors among the devastation. As they enter one collapsed building, they find a mangled mess of steel, concrete and rubble inside. Rescuers carefully walk through a narrow corridor looking for signs of life, using tools to cut through steel bars. The rescue teams have worked for almost 24 hours, facing significant hurdles with repeated aftershocks complicating efforts. Despite these challenges, the Chinese rescuers have made notable progress. 6 survivors have been rescued in severely hit Naypyidaw and Mandalay. In this mound of rubble that was Sky Villa condominium, these Chinese rescuers heard faint knocking sounds from beneath the debris. They said they needed full site silence to identify better the precise demolition depth needed to reach them. They finally rescued a woman and her 5-year-old daughter. Rescue workers and other people stood still as they heard sirens and car horns bellowing for 1 minute at 12:51 p.m., the exact time of Friday's earthquake. This as many are displaced, sleeping in makeshift tents by the roadsides and have to queue for food and water. Meanwhile, more Chinese rescue teams are heading to Myanmar, bringing with them earthquake experts, structural engineers, medical personnel and K9 units, as well as life detectors, demolition equipment and field hospital systems. The World Health Organization said overall more than 10,000 buildings are known to have collapsed or been severely damaged in central and northwestern Myanmar. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Hong Kong rescue teams worked overnight searching for quake survivors in Mandalay, the second largest city in Myanmar. The Hong Kong rescue team arrived in Mandalay on Monday and began its search and rescue operations right away. Drones and dogs specially trained for search and rescue work have been deployed to look for signs of life under the rubble. Fire Services Department personnel used blasting tools and other equipment to open up a passage at one of the collapsed buildings near the Mandalay Palace. They also carried detectors to check if there is any risk of further collapses. Thailand's industry ministry says it has found irregularities in the steel that was used in the Bangkok skyscraper that collapsed during Friday's earthquake. Recovery teams remain at the site, but there is little hope of finding survivors. The death toll stands at 12, but more than 70 people are missing. David Garrett reports.
They've not stopped since the state audit office that was under construction collapsed. More rescue workers arrive as the search enters day 5. The desperate scene comes as Thai anti-corruption inspectors say they found irregularities in the skyscraper's construction. The government threatened to cancel the construction of the building in January. Now rescuers are finding only belongings of the dead and no living souls. Initial tests on debris suggest substandard steel was used. Building began on a 30-storey tower in 2020, a joint venture between Italian-Thai development PCL and China Railway No. 10 Thailand Limited. Further tests are needed, but this is the only building that collapsed in Bangkok. Nuramon Thonglek needs answers. She's waiting to find out if her long-term partner from Myanmar is dead. Nuramon admits she gave up hope when there was no response to texts. She scans her phone, reading the latest news. She's probably heard allegations of poor building practices, but is thinking only of the victims. I want everyone in there to be found in whatever condition. I've already made some peace with it, she says. It's been a few days already. A part of me still hopes miracles exist. Chen Pen Kao Noi, another of many who can only wait, waiting with the other loved ones of the presumed dead. Chan Pen longs for news of her missing mother and younger sister. A survivor told me they were on the 5th floor. They ran down to the 1st floor, then in a split second, the building collapsed. As the race against time continues with cranes and diggers sifting through rubble, the same story is playing out all around. Tired, desperate relatives sit in makeshift accommodation, waiting. Dozens of families in emotional limbo. There are still nearly 80 people missing. David Garrett, TVB News.
The People's Liberation Army performed new large-scale drills in waters around Taiwan. This, as video released, appeared to call the island's leader a parasite. The drills took place north, east, and south of Taiwan. Taiwan says it tracked 19 PLA naval vessels in surrounding waters. Warships, fighter jets, and rocket launchers were seen in the video released. This came just days after the U.S. Defense Secretary visited Japan and had been critical of China. The PLA's Eastern Theater Command called Taiwan's Lai Ching-te a parasite, depicting him as a green bug held by chopsticks over a burning Taiwan. Taiwan condemned the drills. The Foreign Ministry in Beijing said the maneuvers act as a strong deterrent to separatist forces and are necessary to defend national sovereignty. South Korea's Constitutional Court will rule on Friday morning if President Yoon Suk-yeol will be removed from office. Yoon's fate will be broadcast live. The leader has been accused of violating the Constitution after his brief imposition of martial law in December. 6 of the 8 judges have to rule against Yoon in order for him to be impeached. If that happens, presidential elections must be held within 60 days. Supporters for and against impeachment continue to gather in Seoul, with tensions simmering ahead of the announcement. Marking the 60th anniversary of the mainland's Dongjiang water supply to Hong Kong, authorities have organized a water-themed arts exhibition. Some visitors who brought their children along to the gala hoped the exhibition could teach the next generation the importance of drinking water. Timothy Lee tells us more.
Standing at over 18 meters tall, this giant water droplet sculpture is surrounded by more than 100 smaller droplets at Tamar Park. The aquatic-themed sculptures were also placed throughout the central harborfront, attracting scores of curious residents and tourists. The water droplet displays celebrate the 6 decades of Dongjiang water supply to the city. The life-saving measure was initiated as a result of a severe drought in Hong Kong in 1963, which led to a shortage of drinking water in the city. At the time, British colonial authorities placed limitations on the supply of drinking water. At its worst, drinking water was only available for 4 hours every 4 days. In an effort to alleviate the city's water shortage problems, the central government constructed an 83-kilometer-long water channel connecting the Dongjiang River and Hong Kong. 60 years later, the water supply system continues to be the city's main source of drinking water. Some elderly visitors at the exhibition today recalled their experiences with the drought. This visitor said the event is especially meaningful, given that many people today have already forgotten about the water supply system. She also urged the community not to take their access to drinking water for granted. Designed by acclaimed artist Simon Ma, the Dancing Water Drops installations will be open to the public from today until the 13th of June. In a bid to raise awareness of the 60th anniversary of Dongjiang water supply to the city, the water drop sculptures placed along Tamar Park will light up at 8 p.m. to remind residents of the life-saving water supply. Members of the public can enter the exhibition to take photos of the lit-up droplets on Fridays and the weekends. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
That's the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.